Part-2, Chapter-10. AINDRA spent hours in his room worshipping his deities and preaching to devotees, but even more of his time, as many as 12 hours a day, was taken up by his chanting of the holy names in japa and kirtan. Expounding on the difference between the two, AINDRA said, "There are two prominent ways that the gopis are absorbed in the services of Radha and Krishna. Japa is in Nikunja Seva, in which one serves Radha Krishna alone, and Kirtan is Ras Lila, dancing and singing and serving Krishna with all the gopis." Similar to how all the gopis have their individual kunjas for individual personal service, we chant Nam Japa in the mood of Nam Seva to assist in personal intimate service. Nam Japa is thus like facilitating the meeting of Radha and Krishna alone. So Nam Japa is a more secluded personal affair. It's not so extroverted. You may even pull your chadar over your face so that no one can see you crying, and softly mutter the holy name to yourself. It's your own relationship with Radha and Krishna without considering the idea of sharing your Radha and Krishna with others. That comes later. That's Ras Lila and Sankirtan. But whether you're doing Nam Japa or whether you're doing Nam Sankirtan, the principle is to serve Radha and Krishna for their satisfaction. Whether it is your endeavor to satisfy Radha and Krishna by your personal sevas or your transcendentally altruistic para upakar mood of cooperating with others to bring about the pleasure of Radha and Krishna, in both cases the aim is never a self-aggrandizing affair. The aim is not to gain some personal satisfaction. The aim is to satisfy Radha and Krishna, and moreover to bring about the satisfaction of the devotees of Radha and Krishna. That's what brings Sankirtan to a different level. But in Nam Japa, one is free to allow the heart to flow and express one's desperation for the eternal loving service to the holy name in a way that one can't do in public assembly. For practicing devotees, it's powerful to chant Nam Japa in the mood of separation, especially a type of separation called Purvarag, which means the intense, desperate anticipation, hopefully sooner than later, but at least eventually, after millions of lifetimes of endeavor, devotional struggle, to actually meet Radha and Krishna. The idea is that you meditate on the types of services that you would like to do for Radha and Krishna in the Kunja and pray, "When, oh when, will that day be mine?" That is Purvarag. Sankirtan, on the other hand, can be performed in the spirit of Krishna's Ras Lila. The Ras Lila acts as an appetizer to whet Krishna's appetite for more intimate reciprocation with his gopis. In Rupa Goswami's Ujjvala Nilamani, however, there is a description that says that the Ras Lila generates in Krishna a happiness that far surpasses even the experience of his complete intimate union with Srimati Radharani and the gopis. One may ask, how is it possible for Ras Lila to be the highest when the culmination of all the Madhurya Leelas is that Samprayog, when Radha and Krishna are finally united and enjoy their pleasure pastimes in the Kunja? The answer is Vipralamba. It is the mood of separation. So close, yet so far. Krishna is dancing with the gopis, but he is not making love with the gopis, so one's hairs are standing on end. The gopis and Krishna in the ecstasy of dancing Ras Lila, and now Radha and Krishna's impending embrace. The Ras Lila is thus like the hors d'oeuvres served before a feast. The feast is the real objective, but the hors d'oeuvres can be more transcendentally tantalizing, more piquant and full of ras than the feast itself. From Nam Kirtan, Krishna also sees that you are serious about sacrificing your egocentricity for the purpose of helping others to gain access to the holy name. An attraction thus naturally awakens within Krishna to the soul who is performing that yajna. It induces him to relish deeper with that devotee even more intimate loving reciprocation in the form of Nam Japa. In that way, Nam Sankirtan and Nam Japa are always inter-supportive. The culture of Harinam Japa Yagya is said to be a disciple's first and foremost essential obligation at the feet of Sri Guru, Ayendra wrote, though apparently bearing a relatively small radius of para upakar audibility, a disciple's offenseless chanting of at least a fixed minimum number of holy names daily unquestionably constitutes the top priority, most substantial service to Sri Guru and his institution. In fact, the Guru imposes no more imperative order than to regularly complete one's prescribed personal japavrat. Such is the incontrovertible status of Nam Japa's enormous significance. Make sure you chant your 16 rounds a day, he instructed a developing kirtaniya, otherwise your kirtan won't have any power. The first question he'd ask any devotee having trouble with their chanting in kirtan was, "How is your sadhana?" The potency of one's chanting of the holy name in kirtan depended on first completing one's 16 rounds of japa. In one short article, Ayendra emphasized the special importance of chanting japa in the modern world. Some misinformed people say that chanting Hare Krishna is a kind of brainwashing. We, however, suggest that most so-called human beings don't have a brain to wash. Hare Krishna chanting is not brainwashing, it is brain-giving. Those who have a brain will understand this. Those who do not can at least try chanting Hare Krishna, which will give them a brain with which to understand the immense value of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. In this era of ever-encroaching wholesale pollution and inane carelessness, people with good brains will welcome the chance to gain relief from the lying propaganda of misguided materialistic politicians, scientists, and superstitious religionists, all of whom more or less broadcast their own varieties of systematic selfishness, eroding the finer internal sensibilities of almost everyone. The transcendentally potent Hare Krishna vibration of timeless names of Godhead cleanses the heart of all these vicious material pollutants, allowing us to actually perceive the eternal nature of our inner spiritual being, bringing into reach the natural inner peace and happiness for which we are always anxious. Thus, chanting Hare Krishna is not brainwashing so much as it is heart-washing. It gives a brain and cleanses the heart. And if your brain thinks you haven't the heart for it, don't worry. Hare Krishna chanting will give that also. When asked what he thought about when he was chanting, he said, "The essence of what I think about and strive for runs on two parallels. One is the external mood, the mood relevant to my external situation of not being capable to meet Krishna. I base this on Jivadharma's instructions to think of myself as a gopi who is bound by her mother-in-law, who constantly prevents me from meeting with my sham. But by making many clever excuses, I can somehow slip away to do my seva to Radha and Krishna. From there, I can go into the internal mood where I meditate on Radha and Krishna's eternal Astakaliya Leela, but with the mood described in the books of Raghunath Das Goswami. There is a strong need to go deep in our understanding of tattva," he said. "Otherwise, our Nam Bhajan will never go deep, will never be filled with bhav." As much as Ayendra chanted and as deep as was his realization of an attachment to the holy name, he was never satisfied with either. Quote, "I'm 363 rounds behind my quota," he bemoaned one night in frustration. "That's because you're trying to chant so much, besides doing kirtan 8 hours every day and spending so much time worshipping your deities," a devotee pointed out. "That's not why I can't finish my quota," he insisted. "The problem isn't that I'm too busy. The problem is that I have no taste for chanting." He was chanting 64 rounds a day, trying to increase his love for Srimati Radharani, but even after undergoing so many austerities in the effort, he still felt inadequate to the task, and his desperation for spiritual answers kept building. Internally, he begged for greater taste, deeper realization, and especially deeper realization of his eternal spiritual identity and service. One day, while he was chanting, he heard a voice in his head, "First deserve, then desire." The words were Srila Prabhupada's from a purport in the teachings of Queen Kunti, which Prabhupada had often repeated, and a theme on which Aindra often preached. But it was also a phrase that had been twisted by temple managers wanting to avoid answering his difficult philosophical questions. The phrase kept repeating, first intermittently, then every minute, then faster, almost non-stop, over and over. Finally, he threw his bead bag against the wall and yelled, "Damn it, when will I deserve to desire?" When would he receive response to his inquiries? And then he heard a voice, thunderous, coming from everywhere all at once and resounding all around him, filling the room and resonating throughout the ether. "When your desire is big enough." Awestruck, Aindra ran outside and asked devotees in other rooms if they had heard anything, but they hadn't. The voice had been for only him. Frustrated by his inability to gain further realization of his spiritual identity, Aindra's endeavor to further increase his taste and desire manifested in the vrats that he had begun in New York and increased in Vrindavan, even to the point of risking his health and physical well-being. In his effort to serve and please Guru and Radha Krishna, and his lobha to discover his spiritual identity and empower his preaching from his eternal position in relation with them, bodily considerations were secondary. Quote, "It's likely that one will get weak," he acknowledged, "and because of that weakness, it's possible for one to become diseased. But to get diseased by performing such vrat for the purpose of curtailing sense gratification with the aim of augmenting the hopes of attaining prema in this lifetime is much better than to have the disease of lust within the heart and within the senses. If you strictly follow Chaturmasya, you will find that your senses become pacified, and it's advantageous in the matter if it's performed properly with a proper attitude. If one is abstaining from the object of senses while contemplating those objects within, he is a pretender and a first-class nonsense." Knowing the spiritual benefits of following particular vrats was important, he said, but, quote, "even more important than considering scriptural vows and their results is to consider our attitude, our purpose, the motivation behind performing all of these vrats. Just like one vow is to fast from 6 tastes, he said, sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. These tastes agitate the mind to again and again taste those things. So it's mentioned that if you fast from these 6 tastes, the result is that you will have no objectionable body odor. But that's not such an important benediction, just not to have body odor. But those who practiced this particular vow, what they actually experience is something a little different and more practical in terms of achievement of the goal of life. We should have within our heart the mood that whatever is favorable for cultivation of unalloyed devotional bhajan, that is to be accepted. And the things which are not favorable we should not concern ourselves with. So fasting from 6 tastes certainly does, as scriptures say, reduce the body odor, but there is a more important result in that the fasting from 6 tastes makes it that your tongue becomes acclimated to the idea that it will not get varieties of palatable foodstuff. Thereby, the mind becomes used to not chasing after varieties of palatable foodstuff, which helps us in the matter of 1. Controlling the tongue, and 2. Freeing us of aparad against the Mahaprasad, that, quote, "This Mahaprasad is palatable for the gratification of my taste buds, so I accept it, and this Mahaprasad is not palatable, thereby I reject it." which is equivalent to rejecting Krishna. That is aparad on both cases. Mahaprasad is not meant for our sense gratification. Otherwise, if one can control the tongue, one can control all the senses, and when senses come under control, then it's possible to push back the influence of kama that is residing in the senses, mind, and intellect, as described in the Bhagavad Gita. Material benefits were never the goal. Quote, whatever vrat we may be taking, just like if you read Ekadasi Mahatmya, you will see that it is mentioned many times that material results were obtained by people who either knowingly or unknowingly performed Ekadasi vrat in various instances. We should understand that ultimately we are not aiming to achieve any material benedictions. Even the goal of cleansing oneself from sin was not primary. Quote, it is very necessary or useful to reduce our bodily activities in terms of sense gratification and to increase our bhajan so that by the influence of that bhajan we may become so much free from sin. Fasting on these days of Krishna's appearance or on the appearance days of various incarnations and Ekadasi helps the devotee to become free from sin. But becoming free from sin is an insignificant fruit in the matter of chanting the holy name. The real business is the fact that performing Chaturmasya Vrat or Kartik Vrat or Bhishma Panchak Vrat in Vrindavan yields the benefit of unalloyed devotional service. Certainly, one should not be motivated by the desire to cultivate an austere image, to be, quote, recognized as an austere devotee, tyagi, because if one becomes attached to superfluous fruits such as name and fame, profit, adoration, and distinction, these things will automatically undermine the real purpose for which such vows are to be undertaken. One should be very careful with these kinds of vrats, because the tendency is that if someone will strictly follow Chaturmasya, he may look down on other devotees who are not following so strictly. Or if someone is cultivating knowledge, then the tendency is to look down on others. As soon as one thinks that he is better than anyone, immediately the results of his austerities, his knowledge, the benefit of his service becomes very much diminished. Further, quote, gaining mastery over the senses or performances of austerities has no value in and of itself. Austerity or penances or tapasya in and of itself is not an ang of pure devotional service, so we don't have much concern with austerity for its own sake, just like Narada Muni says something to the effect of, quote, what is the use of performing austerity if bhakti has not arisen? But that does not mean that we should not practice austerity. Especially in the Vanaprast ashram, it is useful in order to curb our tendency towards sense gratification, as we are accustomed to in Grihastha ashram, to whatever extent we have allowed ourselves to become acclimated to the mood of enjoying the senses. Ultimately, he said, what we really want to see is whether our devotion is increasing. When one devotee questioned his practice, noting that Srila Prabhupada hadn't emphasized such penances, he had replied, yeah, but what if they work? If our bhajan increases, he said, then we can understand that our acceptance of any vow is favorable, because ultimately it is not what we do, but our attitude. We should maintain the mood that, quote, I am not very qualified. I am not as qualified as other devotees because they are advancing in pure devotional service without having to accept such superfluous or extraneous modes of life. They don't have to perform such severe austerities to gain control over the senses. They are much better than I am. Tapasya may be useful in the beginning by helping us to get a foothold in the house of bhakti, but ultimately the tapasya is not what's important. In his early years in Vrindavan, during the 4 months of Chaturmasya, Ayendra would offer his deities only a handful each of raw soaked rice and mung dal, salt, and ghee on the side, and a little fruit or mishri, rock candy, mixed with anise seeds, with raisins for variety, and would honor only the rice and dal, which he ate off the floor without using his hands. The lack of salt in his diet was especially impactful, as he was constantly dehydrated and weak from not being able to retain water. His liver would weaken, and he'd suffer from jaundice. Even in later years, and for the rest of his life, during Chaturmasya he abstained from all dairy except ghee, which according to Srila Sanatana Goswami in his Hari Bhakti Vilas, bestowed the benediction of going to Goloka Vrindavan at the end of one's life. Beginning on Guru Purnima, he would not shave his face or head for 2 months, then shave at the midpoint on Vishvarup Mahotsav, and then not again for the second 2 months. For Kartik and the month of Purushottam, which, when it came around every 3 years, would increase the summer fast to 5 months, he would have only Ekadasi Prashadam, and during the final 5 days of Kartik, the final month, he would observe the Bhishma Panchak Vrat, completely fasting except for a teaspoon of one type of cow product each day: cow dung, cow urine, ghee, curd, yogurt, and milk. Quote, "It is told that if you follow this fast," he said, "you don't even have to endeavor for unalloyed devotion, but unalloyed devotion comes to your hand." So it is another facility for advancing in Krishna consciousness, which has been mercifully bestowed upon us by Krishna himself. On the last day of Kartik, he would have a massive offering prepared for the deities and host a feast that he would personally serve to the devotees that evening, after the last Damodarastak Kirtan, which he usually led, outside of his room on the veranda. And then, for another month, he would adopt Katyayani's vow, meant for obtaining a good husband, and followed by the gopis and by the sages of Dandakaranya to attain Krishna as theirs, eating only unspiced khichdi and chanting extra rounds of the mantra used by the gopis to worship Katyayani. Katyayani Mahamaye Mahayogin Yadishvari Nandagopa Sutam Devi Patime Kurute Namaha. My respects unto Katyayani, the great controller, great mystic, and great power of the Supreme. Please, O goddess, make Nandagopa's son my husband. In the mornings, despite the cold winter temperatures, he would go down to the Yamuna to bathe. One morning, Bhagavat Das met him there and asked why he braved the elements and came so early. The sun was up, Bhagavat described, but it was still early and, of course, cold, as it usually is at that time of year. I asked him why he didn't come to bathe later, when it got warmer. Ayindra replied, quote, "Young gopis and manjaris, following their vrat, were coming to take their early morning bath, and there was nowhere they could warm themselves, no one to take care of them. Such was their vow. Their determination was unwavering. We have to follow that example." At noon, with Ram Roy, he would take a rickshaw to the Arti at Vrindavan's Katyayani temple and make an offering. In later years, he also went in the evening. And on the last day of the Vrat, he would take the 24-hour Kirtan devotees, do a big Sankirtan, and hold a feast. Altogether, Ayindra observed significant austerities for almost half of each year. During one Vrat, he got so sick that all he could do was lie down in his room. Another devotee helped by serving his deities, but it didn't go well. A tiny Shila was accidentally thrown out, and Ayindra was so upset that he vowed that nothing like that would ever happen again, and scaled down his austerities for the sake of his deities and service. Quote, "If our bhajan suffers," he said, "of course there will always be a little weakness. It may affect us to a certain extent, and that's to be expected. If one sees that his service is drastically reduced, then it is better to take some prasadam and go on Sankirtan. We have to regulate, moderate even in the performance of Chaturmasya Vrat. There are at least 400 different vrats, and you can't take all of them. By that point, he had been strictly observing Chaturmasya Vrat for over 15 years, and at least twice had fasted almost to the point of death. Quote, I accepted such an austere vow and didn't want to break it, and my bhajan may sometimes have suffered, he admitted. So I basically learned the hard way to concentrate only on those most important vows, which are useful in my culture of Krishna Prema, or at least in the culture of hope of augmenting such prospects for getting Krishna Prema by their grace. It's not that it is caused by our activities. Ultimately, it is by their grace, by their special mercy, that we are elevated to such a status when they see that we have cried hard and long enough that they mercifully bestow their prema, bhakti, shakti on us. Inspired by Aindra's example, some young devotees also began to follow brats, especially during Kartik and Purushottam. Aindra was concerned that they performed the brats correctly, however, and so would instruct them however possible, posting detailed explanations with quotes from Shastra and making announcements in the temple room after Mangalartik. He stocked and distributed fast ingredients, such as for Bhishma Panchak Vrat, which required exclusively cow products, some of which could be difficult to obtain. And when it came time to break the fast, he instructed devotees to go around the temple to distribute sweets, juice, and various presents and donations to honor the Brahmins and Vaishnavas.